Look at where we are today. My goodness gracious, just 41% of Americans, the lowest number this century.
CNN now shocked to learn that the American people agree that the FBI needs reform. One of the big issues that Donald Trump took to Election Day to the American people was corruption in our federal government, and most specifically in the Justice Department and the FBI. He was living proof of that. Friends of his were living proof of that. The people who got caught up in the January 6th investigation and prosecutions were all living proof of that. The American people need to know that their Justice Department can operate free and unfettered from politics. And we've already pointed out that, ironically, the rationale Joe Biden used to pardon his son, Hunter, actually reinforces this notion that the Justice Department can be used arbitrarily and politically, and that's corruption, and it's dangerous, and it's wrong. You know, you often hear this joke in Washington, D.C., where people say, a U.S. attorney can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich. I try that again. You often hear this joke in Washington, D.C. People say it all the time, that a U.S. attorney can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich if they wanted to. And everyone laughs. Yeah, that's right. That's the way it is. And nowhere does anyone say, wait a second, that's awful. That's evil. That's abuse of power. That's corrupt. The ham sandwich is innocent. I don't care if you got the ham sandwich indicted. I guarantee you that that ham sandwich did not break the law. But everybody says it like this is just sort of one of those truths that we all should live with. And the fact that a U.S. attorney and the Justice Department is that powerful that they could, in fact, get an indictment against a ham sandwich tells you that things need to be fixed at the Justice Department. So Donald Trump made that case to the American people, and the American people, as we know, overwhelmingly affirmed Donald Trump as the man to come into Washington and do the things he said he would do, including reforming the Justice Department and the FBI. Now let's skip to CNN yesterday as they took up the issue of the American people's opinion on whether the FBI should be reformed or not, because they were shocked, I tell you, to learn that the American people want Donald Trump to do exactly what he promised he'd do.
Patel has real reason to believe that Americans would go along with changes that he might potentially make at the FBI. And there's a reason why Donald Trump feels like he can make this change. It's because if you look here, FBI is doing an excellent or good job. Look at this time trend line. You go back to 2014, right? It was 59% of Americans, then 57% in 2019, 50% in 2022. Look at where we are today. My goodness gracious, just 41% of Americans think the FBI is doing an excellent or good job. That is by far the lowest number this century. The bottom line is, during the Trump administration, obviously there were the investigations into Donald Trump. You saw a little bit of drop then, and then post January 6th, look at that drop, 50%, now 41%. My goodness gracious, Kate.
My goodness gracious, indeed, Mr. Enton. So they're really, really surprised to learn that the American people have lost faith in the FBI and, writ large, the Justice Department. It's as if they're not actually watching the news or paying attention to the news. Of course, they're in the news business, so I don't know what they're watching, maybe cartoons or something. Can we look at this graph for a minute? So 2014, 59% of the people in America surveyed had faith in the FBI. This is 2 years into Obama's second term, hadn't started the campaign in 2016 yet. There hadn't been an investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. There hadn't been investigations into Donald Trump's campaign. For the most part, the American people seemed okay with what the FBI was doing. 59% isn't stellar, but it's better than, not. 5 years later, what happened? Well, first of all, remember, Hillary Clinton blames her loss on James Comey. Everybody forgets that. You can't insult the director of the FBI. You can't insult the Justice Department. That's undermining our democracy. It's undermining our institutions. You ask Hillary Clinton today. In fact, Bill Clinton just said it the other day, that the reason Hillary Clinton lost was because of James Comey and his political use of the FBI against her in the email case. Yeah, it's amazing how this works, isn't it? And then also in 2019, we had some notion of what the FBI had done in investigating Donald Trump, but we didn't have all the facts yet. We didn't know about the FISA warrants. We didn't know about the fact that they adopted the Steele dossier, which was paid for opposition research funded by Hillary Clinton and her campaign. We didn't know the tactics that they had used to create this surveillance state around the Trump campaign and the Trump presidency. You fast forward to 2022, it's now dropped down to 50% because we've learned all of the things that the FBI did on James Comey's watch. Now you fast forward 2 years later in 2024. What have we learned in the last 2 years? Well, we've seen the FBI investigate regular American citizens, looked upon them as suspects and potential terrorists because they go to traditional Latin mass, because they pray the rosary outside an abortion mill, or because they go to a school board meeting voicing their disapproval over the COVID policies there. We also learned that the FBI strong-armed Twitter and other social media platforms to censor any information about, somebody voicing their opinion that maybe this COVID virus came from a lab in Wuhan. You've got to be censored. You can't be saying that. And of course, how they ganged up on the New York Post and anybody else who said, geez, this Hunter Biden laptop story seems like it's a real deal. Nope, you're peddling in Russian disinformation. And every time you raise any concerns about the FBI, you become on the enemies list. So why is it surprising? In fact, frankly, I look at this graph and I'm actually concerned that 41% of the American people still think the FBI is doing a good or excellent job. The fact is, we know that there are serious political problems at the FBI and at the Justice Department, and frankly, in every part of the ingrained bureaucracy of Washington, D.C. They think that they're above the law. They think that they need to protect the American people from the president that they just elected. That's how they operate. They think they're actually above the Constitution, while at the same time they claim they're protecting the Constitution. It's insidious and it's dangerous and it's wrong. But again, we have a president who literally ran on this platform and said, elect me and I will clean this mess up. And now he's put people in place to do it. And most specifically, the man he's tapped to be the director of the FBI is the eminently qualified Kash Patel. Kash Patel worked in the Justice Department as a lawyer. He was a hostage negotiator and worked with the FBI for hostage negotiation issues. He also was the top staff member for the House Select Committee on Intelligence. In working with Chairman Devin Nunes at that time, he uncovered the truth about the Russiagate hoax and about what James Comey and the FBI did. He learned the origins of the Steele dossier. He revealed to the American people all of the secrets that they tried to keep quiet about the investigation into Donald Trump and the FISA warrants that were pulled to spy on him and his campaign. He also then worked as the Deputy Director of National Intelligence under Ambassador Rick Grenell, and he saw the corruption in those intelligence community assets. He also was the Chief of Staff for the Pentagon in his final job for President Donald Trump. He was in the room when Donald Trump pre-authorized the use of the National Guard on January 6th. He saw that Nancy Pelosi and Muriel Bowser, the mayor of D.C., never called the National Guard. And when people blamed Donald Trump for that, Kash Patel stepped forward and said, what are you talking about? I was there when he pre-authorized it. Sadly, his testimony never made it into the primetime January 6th committee hearings. They know that Kash Patel is eminently qualified based on his resume. They also know that Kash Patel has seen the corruption over the last 10 years. He's literally written a book about it called Government Gangsters. They're terrified that Kash Patel will actually take his knowledge, take his experience, take his skills, and finally clean up the mess. Now, CNN at least had a segment showing, the American people seem to be on the side of doing this. MSNBC, their head is buried in the sand. On Morning Joe, they brought on David Ignatius, one of the chief peddlers of Russian collusion disinformation during the first Trump presidency. And he sounded the alarm about Kash Patel because MSNBC, they either don't care what the American people think, don't know what the American people think, or they're still arrogant enough to think that they will be able to convince the American people that they're wrong and they should agree with MSNBC. Now, that ship has sailed, certainly, but let's see what Ignatius said about Kash Patel.
Way. He wanted to install a Trump loyalist in a key position at the National Security Agency, one of our most sensitive intelligence collection facilities. He talked with the CIA about reducing the Pentagon's support for CIA operations. Whole string of things. He made clear to the people that he was working with at the Pentagon that he was not there to do the normal job of being a chief of staff, but to do the president's bidding. And I think what's of concern when you think about him as FBI director is the FBI director has extraordinary powers to conduct surveillance on American citizens. And those powers to listen into phone calls, to read mail, so to speak, would be directed by somebody who has shown that he has a very political agenda. And as you said, in his book, he had an enemies list.
You know, the lack of self-realization here, as David Ignatius says this, is absolutely dumbfounding to anybody who's paying attention to news and politics and what has happened in this country over the last 10 years. I just need to play this last part again because it is I literally am speechless here as David Ignatius raises the alarm bells over putting somebody like Kash Patel in as director of FBI, considering the power they have to surveil innocent American citizens. Did you catch that?
Director is the FBI director has extraordinary powers to conduct surveillance on American citizens. And those powers to listen into phone calls, to read mail, so to speak, would be directed by somebody who has shown that he has a very political agenda. And as you said, in his book, he had an enemies list.
James Comey was the director of the FBI back in 2016 during the presidential election. His number two man was Andrew McCabe. Andrew McCabe is now a CNN analyst. His wife, by the way, ran as a Democrat in the state legislature in Virginia. Got huge amounts of campaign funds from then Governor Terry McAuliffe, who was an ally of Hillary Clinton, right? He's completely politically connected to the Democrats. Andrew McCabe is. He was the deputy director of the FBI. Peter Strzok was in charge of the counterintelligence division of the FBI. And Lisa Page was a top attorney for Andrew McCabe over at the FBI. Those four names, Comey, number one, McCabe, number two, Peter Strzok in charge of counterintelligence, Lisa Page, lawyer for Andrew McCabe. Peter Strzok and Lisa Page had a love affair at the FBI, extramarital affair. They were schlepping each other. They traded text messages back and forth with each other about how much they hated Donald Trump. You remember one of the text messages that Peter Strzok sent to his girlfriend, Lisa Page, is, "Don't worry, if Trump wins the election, Andy reminded us of the insurance policy we'd have." Who's Andy? Andy is Andrew McCabe, the number two. What was the insurance policy? Well, that was the investigation, the Russian collusion investigation that had already been underway, headed up by Peter Strzok at the counterintelligence division of the FBI. All of that was happening under James Comey's watch. Part of the counterintelligence investigation, called Crossfire Hurricane, that investigated Donald Trump, included FISA warrants. FISA, that's a court that allows for national security purposes, the FBI, to conduct surveillance operations on American citizens. The reason that they're allowed to conduct surveillance operations on American citizens is to prevent a terror attack from happening. This was instituted in the Patriot Act back during the Bush years after 9/11. So they used a law that was set up to protect us from radical Islamic terrorists murdering thousands of people in a terror attack or bombing or the 9/11 type attack. They used that, the FISA court, to conduct surveillance on a man named Carter Page, who was an unpaid volunteer in the Trump campaign in 2016. Carter Page is a Naval Academy graduate who has never been arrested, let alone convicted of any kind of crime, local, state, or federal. But they convinced a FISA court that he was a Russian asset, a spy, and he was embedded in the Trump campaign, and he had to be surveilled. And of course, the surveillance that Andrew McCabe authorized through James Comey, the director of the FBI, at the request of Peter Strzok, You know, the same guy who said we have an insurance policy if Trump wins the election. Don't worry, Lisa Page, my lover, we got you covered. That same surveillance warrant that they conducted on Carter Page then allowed them to listen out on phone calls, see text messages, and read emails for anybody who communicated with Carter Page. That included Donald Trump. It included Michael Pence. It included Steve Bannon. It included every aspect of the Trump campaign. They were able to conduct surveillance on all of them. That happened. That's not some fever dream. It's not some fantasy or imaginary horrible hypothetical that you could dream up. Like, oh my gosh, it would be terrible if a bad, corrupt political person had power at the FBI. Think about what he could do. No, it happened. Everything that I fact check, everything I just told you. Go ahead. That's history. That happened. Those people were in charge of the FBI. They did abuse those powers. They did it for political purposes. They did it against the guy that half of the country voted for. They did it against the guy who became president, and they maintained that surveillance while he was president. And when the president asked James Comey point blank, his director of the FBI, am I under investigation? James Comey lied to him and said no. And now David Ignatius steps up there on Morning Joe, and all of them with those very serious faces and furrowed brows all say, oh, yes, this would be horrible. This would be awful if someone like Kash Patel had that kind of power. We just lived through it. And he's pretending like it never happened. And by the way, this guy's pretending like it because he was part of it. Because every time James Comey or Andy McCabe or any other people that he had sources in the FBI or Justice Department wanted to push some narrative in the media, well, they just leaked it to David Ignatius at the Washington Post, and then he put it out there as if it was reporting, as if it was journalism, when it was all fraudulent. It's outrageous. It's ridiculous. It's enraging. Yet at the same time, I am comforted by their reaction. I am at peace with their reaction. I am actually jubilant that they are this terrified of Kash Patel being the FBI director. And frankly, any Republican senator watching this process unfold before their eyes, if they don't affirm Kash Patel as the director of the FBI, as far as I'm concerned, they're part of the problem. They're trying to protect the status quo because they're part of it. Hey, if you open an IRA in gold with Birch Gold, you'll get a free silver. Wait, let me rephrase that. You'll get free silver shipped directly to your home. That's right. It's the most wonderful time of the year, right? Silver and gold. And it's the only time of the year that Birch Gold gives away a free 1-ounce silver eagle for every $5,000 purchased. And the best part is you don't actually have to pay a penny out of pocket. Yeah, because you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold, and Birch Gold is going to send your free silver coins directly to your home. Now, if you're thinking, I don't need to worry about silver or gold or anything like that because my God's headed to DC. Things are good. We won the election. No. An administration trying to reverse a $36 trillion national debt in just 4 years is like a field mouse trying to stop a freight train. I love that imagery. We have a huge amount to pay on the interest on the debt alone, let alone the principal. So take action now. Text my name, Larry, Larry, to 989898 before December 18th, and you'll get a free info kit on gold, and you'll claim your eligibility for that free silver on qualifying purchases from Birch Gold. Do this before December 18th, though. Again, text Larry to the number 989898 for peace of mind that lasts longer than just 4 years.